What do you think about the Dolphins trading for Jalen Ramsey and the impact that he can bring to that Dolphins defense next season?
Dude, we're talking about one of the best corners in football. Obviously, we know him for being the best corner over the last couple of seasons, but he did have a down year. I will give him somewhat of a pass because LA completely fell apart in multiple facets. The defense couldn't stop anybody. Then you got to talk about the offense being inconsistent, rolling through 3, 4 quarterbacks to where you had to sign Baker Mayfield off of the waiver wire, which is just unheard of at this point in the season, especially with his career and his resume. And the Rams weren't really able to do much, if anything at all. So again, I will chalk up his last season to the ineptitude of the team as a whole. And then, of course, when the offense can't score and the offense can't stay on the field, I say this pretty much what it feels like every week. Your defense gets tired, your defense gets winded, they get burnt out, and obviously that means bigger plays happen, miscues, mistakes, etc. You talk about the Dolphins; they made a move for Bradley Chubb. They cut Byron Jones. They extended Xavier Howard a few years ago, if not last year. They are making moves and strides to go about making a winning culture. They traded for Tyreek Hill last year. They picked up Tua's fifth-year option. Mike McDaniels and what he was able to display when the team was at full strength showed that this Dolphins offense could compete with the best of them, but had some weaknesses in the defensive side. They weren't the greatest pass rushing team. They weren't the greatest cover team. But again, what they've acquired with the two pieces in terms of Bradley Chubb and now Jalen Ramsey, you pair two all-pro corners on the outside. You have an elite pass rusher. Chris Wilkins had a breakout season last year at the defensive tackle position. I believe that this catapults Miami extensively because, again, the offense takes care of itself. You add an all-pro corner that doesn't have to be the everything of a defense in the secondary. You have a complementary cornerback on the other side. We saw what this did for Darius Slay when they got Bradbury in Philadelphia and how they were able to lock it down. Now you have some assistance with Xavier. Jalen Ramsey can play a little bit more freely, and I think that this Dolphins defense will take that next step into ascending into an upper, if not above average defense, which is going to help create turnovers. And again, when you have Jalen Ramsey on one side and Xavier Howard on the other, you have to make judgment calls on what side you want to gamble with. I would probably lean a little bit more with the Xavier side, not to disrespect him, but he has fallen off a little bit in recent memory. But I think the two of them combined easily can remedy a combination for arguably one of the better cornerback duos in the NFL. And I think if Miami plays their cards right and Tua can stay healthy, Miami will be right back in the playoffs and probably get a win or two.
I think for me, I think the Dolphins definitely are getting a great piece in Jalen Ramsey. The only thing that we have to keep in mind with Jalen is what sort of Jalen are we going to get? Are we going to get that breakout Jalen Ramsey that was essentially hot off the presses in Jacksonville? But Kev, we were looking at his stats before we started recording. And last year, granted, I know that defense was subpar to say the least. But statistically speaking, Jalen did not have his best year in defensive coverage. And there have been times where Jalen has been burnt. Jalen has been beat one-on-one, and not just for short little plays. Sometimes these are some pretty big plays that he's giving up in the process. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to monitor when Jalen hits the field as a member of the Dolphins going into next year. But when it comes to what the Dolphins have on paper, like Kev said, when you have Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey as your two-star corners, that's going to be a nightmare scenario for opposing quarterbacks. So I guess if you're looking at it from, I guess, a depth perspective when it comes to the Dolphins, you'd have to focus on maybe trying to round out your third and fourth corners, because more than likely what offenses are going to do is they're going to look at the field. They're going to scan what they have in front of them. Okay, you got Jalen on the left or the right side. You got Xavier on the left or right side of the defense. More than likely, they're going to have to focus on trying to beat their third or fourth corner on the roster. And maybe that's the one way they could potentially get past this Dolphins defense in the secondary. But with Jalen in the fold in Miami, I think it immediately bolsters this defense. And now it's just whether or not that he's going to be able to play up to the standard that we saw more in Jacksonville than we did with the Rams. Now, granted, last year statistically, he tied his career high in interceptions. But when it came to the passing coverage that he was allowing about 62% of the passes thrown his way to be completed to the receivers he was going up against. It wasn't his career worst. I believe when he was traded to the Rams in that initial year, he was giving up around 65 to 67% of the passes that were coming his way. But we have to see something very similar to that type of style that was so prevalent early on in his career in Jacksonville. Could he be able to attain similar numbers? I believe so. I think with the way that the Dolphins have been playing the last couple of years, they are a trending team as far as trending in the right direction. And I think their defensive system is going to be pretty solid. They have Vic Fangio coming into the fold as their DC this upcoming year. So there are some changes on this defense that have already taken place. And as far as I see it, this move definitely bolsters their defense. I think it strengthens the team as a whole. And I think, like Kev said, I think if they play their cards right, their destiny is kind of in their own hands, and they can definitely not only make a decent playoff berth as far as the seed is concerned, but they could potentially win, past the wild card round and get into the divisional round. It just kind of depends on if this defense can play up to snuff, if Mike McDaniel improves from his first year as a head coach, and Tua hopefully stays healthy. But overall, I like where the Dolphins are going. I think this is a good move to pick up Jalen, and we'll see if these guys can bring it all together going into next year.